John Wadeson, welcome to the CIO Master Series.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Until recently, you were the Chief Information Officer of Centrelink, but based on a new federal government initiative, you're now the Deputy Secretary, ICT Infrastructure of the Human Services Portfolio, which includes Centrelink, Medicare Australia and the Child Support Agency. You're now in charge of one of the biggest information technology budgets in Australia and front and centre of a massive restructuring of the largest service delivery agency in Australia. What was your first thought when you realised that you now had one of the most exciting, but also one of the most challenging IT jobs in Australia?
It was a bit of a shock, I must say. You don't jump at these things lightly. But, you know, working in Centrelink was always such a dynamic organisation. Change drives Centrelink enormously. So it's always responding to this, responding to that. So I must admit, I think for many people we thought this was almost a natural evolution of where things were going anyway. So it's a matter of knuckling down, getting on with it.
How did you arrive at one of the top technology jobs in Australia?
Like everyone else, more by luck and mismanagement than by design. I was actually in the service delivery network for the old apartment. In fact, I was the managing a Perth office over in WA at the time. And I was asked why I hadn't applied for a job. And I said, well, you know, it's ICT Infrastructure, and believe it or not, I've never logged onto anyone's computer. This was many years ago. And they said, oh, that's all right. We need to reduce the number of data centres, and we hear you're good at closing things. So I came into IT from that, and I found myself the head of infrastructure in the old department. And although I went out again, and several times, I think once you're in for life. It's that sort of a career.
The human services system delivers services to 99.9% of the Australian population, has to handle 7 billion customer transactions every year, and manage the access and workstations for 40,000 staff across 1,900 access points nationwide. How can one person get their head around the vast complexity of your IT infrastructure?
Well, it's not just my head. I've got a terrific staff, and we draw on our suppliers. We're truly multi-sourced in that sense. And if I had to sit here and worry about every connection every night, you're right, I'd suffer badly from lack of sleep. But we had the resources to do that. And these days, the IT monitoring tools are just fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of technology that supports our management. I would argue that to manage this today is in fact, you could argue, easier than managing much smaller networks 10 to 15 years ago.
Under the reform program that's now underway, you'll be merging the backroom operations for all the agencies in the human services portfolio. Does this reflect a new understanding by the politicians and the bureaucrats of the power of information technology to change organisations?
It's a little bit of that. I think that there's a couple of motives that underpin this. One is that clearly pushing things together enables you to do things cheaper. And I mean, I can't walk away from that. This is about that hard word called efficiency. Everyone worries about the bottom line, and that happens in government too. But the other side of it is that, the way IT is evolving, we all have to get into the world where we can link these organisations to the revolution that is IT. Everyone wants to be part of what's coming down the tube, not stuck with old stuff, just doing the same stuff year after year, and eventually you go out backwards. The only way to do that is to get together. Government can't support all these agencies doing their stuff separately. It just doesn't work that way. So, there's a lot of good things might come out of this.
To what extent do you have to be an evangelist for technology in order to convince successive governments to spend money on infrastructure?
Every day. Never mind about the governments, I've got to convince people inside the organisation. Look, it's a constant battle. IT suffered badly from terms like business-driven and things like that, as if we don't have a say. Fortunately, in this organisation, I report direct to the Secretary of Human Services. We do have a say, and you've just got to fight for that all the time, because you get a lot of free advice. It's just one of those things. I don't know whether evangelist is the word, probably a little strong, but you need to be an advocate, and what you need to do is get people to understand the change that IT brings and what it does. It's easy to forget sometimes.
What are your academic qualifications and how important are they to your current role?
Oh, very important, because I studied economics, and gee, this is a lot of resource management. And also too, when I started in the public service, I started in the Department of Finance and Treasury. So yeah, I think that sort of career is pretty good to go into IT. A lot of what we do is balancing off competing demands for resources, and also too, you do understand what it means, why governments have periods where they constrain expenditure, and you can answer a lot of the why questions that people have in IT.
How has the role of the CIO in government agencies changed in recent years?
Well, it's a lot more about, well, one, it's about whole of government. It's about working across government all the time. I spend much more of my time in that space than than previously was the case. And it's a lot more about sharing. It's a lot more about understanding. To share, you've got to understand what everyone else is doing. And that's become a big feature of what we do. The resource questions haven't got any easier. We had the Gershon review. We've had to really focus on efficiencies. Once it was sort of, well, if you got round to it, you'd worry about it. But now it's something that sits front and centre every day. How are we going to? We want to do new things. What is it that we're going to save on to enable those new things to take place?
How does Australia compare to the rest of the world when it comes to the use of technology in government?
Well, we have a pretty active group. There's this, in fact, I've had a number of phone hookups recently with work and pensions in the UK. We keep in close contact with SSA, Social Security America. We're constant contact with our Kiwi friends. So there's quite a group. Canada, of course, does a lot of things in parallel to Australia. And we all argue about who's in front. And I think it's fair to say that any sort of detailed analysis shows that some areas we get ahead, some areas they're ahead, and we leapfrog each other from time to time, but we do learn from each other. We really do learn a lot. Recently in this office I had a very extensive hookup with the UK people because they're doing a big scanning, digitisation workflow system. Our architecture's almost identical. And it gives people a lot of confidence that you're doing something that works in a similar environment somewhere else in the world.
How important is it for CIOs at large government agencies to have executed a large infrastructure project?
I think not only do you have to execute one, you've probably got to have failed at something. Interesting cultural thing in Australia. We're not good at saying that failure's a great learning exercise. The Americans do it really well. But here it can sort of carry around like a bit of baggage. But I think that anyone who gets to these levels and says they've never had a failure is maybe misleading themselves somewhat, or they've never done anything.
Technology is changing the lives of all Australians. Do you see government agencies reacting to technology trends such as smartphones, iPads and a pervasive internet to deliver services in a way that will better engage with customers?
The net is taking off in terms of government dealing with customer groups. I mean, just in this organisation, we're going through one of our seasonal peaks at the minute. We're hitting 170 to 180,000 people a day. That's logging into the secure area. We don't even bother counting broadband hits on the... And so, I go to a lot of conferences and they say how to get people online and all the rest of it. I think, well, one worry I really don't have, it's growing of its own accord, 30 to 40% a year. I have trouble keeping up with it. The issue is, and the real issue in service delivery is, that a lot of those people come in on that channel, but then they'll pick up the phone and then they might go into the office. We're not seeing this sort of, the call centres, we hit our peaks together. And it's that, the Americans call it web stickiness. How do you keep people in there so they stay there and don't, because many of the things they then ring up about they could do on the web, but they're using it more as an information channel. Now this may change over time and we've got to get better at talking to them about completing transactions. But the revolution is there. I think that people just expect they can deal with you this way. I think we're now very good at Web 1 applications. Web 2's, I think, slower, and I wouldn't pretend that we're leaders in that area, but by gee, we can do Web 1 well. Yeah.
What does Government 2.0 mean to you?
Well, interesting. It's being led from the centre a bit. The main early focus of it seems to be about public servants themselves and how do you get them to engage in discussions across government. I mean, which is a good spot to start because, you know, you don't quite have all the issues that you get to in more broad-based discussions. And interesting, some departments done this enormously well, tend to be the smaller policy agencies. I think we've been relatively slow. Now, in terms of the broader engagement in the Web Government 2.0, there's been some really successful and interesting work being done, but it's a bit all over the place at the minute, and I think I'd say we've got our L plates on.
How will a national broadband network and greater connectivity benefit Australians?
I don't think you can be in industry, in this business, and not support that. I understand the argument about, well, you know, in terms of what happens today, is there really a benefit? But it's not about what happens today. It's about what will be invented to run on it. You know, I mean, the whole experience that I've had in government is that we build capability about supporting today, but government invents policy to run on it. That's why we're always behind. As soon as you have a powerful way of doing something, along comes policy that exploits it. I mean, it's that classic chicken and the egg, and I think the NBN will be like that. I mean, I don't think it's about, gee, I'll be able to get a good television reception on it. It's about what else I'll be able to do that I can't even comprehend now. And that's why I think that, you know, I just think for the sake of the country, this is a good thing for us to be doing.
John Wadeson, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.